introduction of a tax on another tax. Most municipal councils were against the VAT.
Well, the Johannesburg City Council, as with other major cities, as with other members of the United Municipal Executive, are going to make very strident representations to the Minister of Finance that this should not be allowed and that we should be zero rated as far as property is concerned.
Despite the nationwide objection to VAT, government went ahead and it was introduced. This prompted a nationwide strike action on the 4th of November 1991. COSATU, along with the African National Congress and other organizations, led the strike action.
We estimated that more than 3.5 million workers today supported the general strike, which was called to demand that the government change the VAT system and immediately enter into negotiations on the macroeconomic future and policies of South Africa. Today's action was also a remarkable display of unity by a wide range of trade unions, civic, political organizations, business groups across the spectrum. NAFCOC, FAPCOS, SAPTA, and small business fully supported this action. We commend these organizations for the efficient way in which they have ensured that our action was a success.
Few months before the introduction of VAT, government consulted various stakeholders for inputs. A multiracial coordinating committee on VAT was established to formalize engagement with the government of F.W. de Klerk on the proposed introduction of VAT. The group was represented by 18 organizations, including Operation Hunger, trade unions, consumer and health bodies.
The state president has given us his undertaking that he would look very seriously at the proposals we put before him today, particularly those proposals relating to zero rating of basic foodstuffs, the provisions for mechanisms to enable particularly the disadvantaged communities on questions of water and electricity. There was also a commitment from him to look at further ways on negotiation related to provision of poverty relief programs. We do believe, however, and made it very clear in our meetings, that we felt that those provisions for poverty relief were totally inadequate.
The education sector took the decision not to take part in the nationwide protest actions, but teacher unions warned that pupils and teachers were prepared to join the picket lines soon after the examinations.
We don't want to plan any form of mass action because we think that all our efforts must be directed at the examination process. After examinations, we are considering possibilities of students and teachers participating in the strike because we are actually supporting the campaign against VAT in the country.
The coordinating committee on VAT was established to look at some of the concerns raised. ANC and COSATU members were included in the committee. Despite this, there was still a lack of trust between the ANC and the National Party government.
At the very last meeting, when our committee had a meeting with Du Plessis, all he did was demonstrate his kragdadig hate and informed the committee that he is not prepared to move even an inch towards meeting the demands that are being made by the people. Mr. Chairman, this is a clear indication that the South African government, in implementing this tax, is actually making a mockery of the whole process of negotiation. But what do we find on tax? We find that the government is actually willing to do it alone, do it on an arbitrary fashion without any consultation whatsoever.
One of the VAT committee members, Bani Fanarov, a former trade unionist, warned government against taking unpopular policy decisions.
That the government up to now hasn't really understood the level of opposition in a very wide spectrum of organizations and among the people in the street against the VAT system. We hope that from today's summit it will be clear to the government that this is an extremely unpopular action that they've taken, and in view of that opposition, that they will be prepared to look more openly for a solution.
Then Minister of Finance Baron Du Plessis condemned the protest actions aimed to challenge the introduction of VAT.
A value-added tax is a good tax. The cement price is already cheaper as a result of it. It is a good tax. We must maintain value-added tax as a good tax on a wide base at the lowest possible rate. It will serve our economy best, and the people in the private sector understand it. And then also, we cannot, by way of pressure or protest marches or whatever, be forced to involve trade unions and all kinds of organizations into policy making as far as tax is concerned.
The ANC and COSATU used its seat at the newly established VAT committee to push for zero rating of certain foodstuff.
Warned previously that the way in which VAT is being imposed will threaten a tax revolt as a whole. Already in the coordinating committee, the medical sector has indicated that there will be civil disobedience relating to the payment of tax on medical services. We have indicated that this civil disobedience is going to take the form of resisting other forms of taxes. The coordinating committee on VAT has also adopted a program of action that will involve the organizing of mass marches on the 30th of September.
At the end, government had its way, and the VAT was introduced at 10%. Tshepo Mongoai, SABC News, Johannesburg.
There you have it. I think that insert definitely trying to give us some background in terms of the history of value-added tax in South Africa following its introduction for the first time in 1991, replacing the sales tax. For some more context on this, I'm joined here by the Secretary General of SAFTU, Zwelinzima Vavi, who was there, witnessed some of the exchange discussions, protests that happened at that time. What did you make of the introduction of value-added tax? Particularly, we know that at the time, the apartheid government was under pressure financially because of the sanctions, and they wanted to raise money. But the other issue is it was on the eve of their departure from government, a point that even in the inserts, Jay Naidu is raising.
Well, they were literally sitting on the departure lounge when they decided to pull a number of tricks. And in our view, all of this was designed to ensure that the future government they knew will be led by the ANC will be robbed of the critical economic instruments to effect fundamental transformation of society and to be true to the very popular slogan of a better life for all the wealth of the country shall be shared, coming from the economic demands of the Freedom Charter. So on the last days, they did a number of things. VAT was introduced and rammed down the throats of the country. I think it was on the 30th of September 1991. We reacted through a general strike supported or led by COSATU, but NACTU participating, but heavily supported by the alliance partners of COSATU, the ANC and the SABC, and a host of other mass democratic movement formations that were pretty strong at that moment. It was not only the VAT that the regime introduced. In 1989, they would have announced the privatization of ISCO, of Sasol, and they introduced a macroeconomic strategy in 1990, and that was going to be a typical framework. We're talking today the days of a fiscal framework. The framework was introduced by Baron du Plessis in 1990.
He was indeed the minister at the time.
Was the Minister of Finance. And we were incensed. We were angry. The working class was angry. And that's why that strike was supported by over 4 million workers.
Yeah, but one can argue that VAT even post-apartheid has served as well. That's why today we say this is a viable source of revenue that has been good for us, so maybe we should up it a bit, because we understand that it can actually help us to deal with some of the challenges.
Well, we have to look at it in the context. There was a general sales tax that was introduced in 1978 by the National Party. It lasted between 1978 until 1991 that they introduced, and by the way, important to make this point, the general sales tax applied only at the end of the chain, at the retail level. That's when you paid a 4% of general sales tax, way low. The value-added tax they introduced was now a multi-purpose. It applied at every step of the way, from your manufacturing to transport to retail.
Imports.
You pay everything. Yeah. Everything is there. Introduced at 10% initially.
Yes.
The reason why we objected as the progressive forces at the time was that we regarded, as we still regard it up to this moment, as a regressive tax system that impact disproportionately more on the poor than it will impact on the richer members of society. That remains the position. And I would have now thought that ANC of the wealth shall be shared, progressive RDP, and shift the burden of tax paying from the shoulders of the poor to the shoulders of the rich. Remember, by the way, interestingly, that in 1992, the corporates were paying up to 52% of taxes to the regime, 52%.
Perhaps you have to give it to the National Party. There was a committee, a coordinating committee on VAT. For the first time, they invited many of the COSATU and ANC members who were actually invited at National Treasury to make an input. And then that's why we saw the zero rating in VAT that we have seen. Of course, one of the issues was the fact that many people were against the payment of VAT on levies, municipal levies, on medical services. But there was an input, and somehow they listened to some of those inputs.
There was power at the same time. It was not just clever intellectuals engaging. Baron du Plessis, the Minister of Finance, he knew that he could not ignore that mass power commanded by COSATU and the Tripartite Alliance. Oh, history is bad. History is the best teacher. And look, here is the National Party, an illegitimate regime, being forced to talk to J. Naidu, the General Secretary of COSATU, Cunningham Ngugana, the General Secretary of NACTU, James Mdlalose, the President of NACTU, may his soul rest in peace, Elijah Bahai, the President of COSATU, but then in leading intellectuals in the ANC, Paulo Jordan, and many others. They were consulted, and it is out of the combination.
Saki Matozoma was there as well.
Saki Matozoma, all of them.
Tito Mboweni.
Yes. All of these people went to engage. And it is out of that engagement that, combined with this powerful strike, that they got some few concessions to zero rate some of the most basic stuffs that workers use more, which was...
In-depth reporting there from SABC News economics editor Tshepo Mongoai, just putting it all into its historical perspective, the whole issue of value-added tax.